All right, well, welcome back to American Gladio. We have a panel today. We have joining us from Tennessee, Alex, of recent fame for the We Shall Overcome debate on pornography and obscenity. Say hi, Alex.
Hey, tune in
Was
for the second coming. It's happening soon.
what?
The
Oh,
second
yeah,
coming.
yeah. How was your Sunday? Was it auspiciously holy after yesterday?
Something like that.
So, our next guy, you're familiar with him, is from LA, number 80. What about you? How was your Sunday?
My Sunday was fine. I just got back from like a Japanese cafe, so it's pretty cool.
Okay, and joining us is our new guest, Tom Binns. I put his channel in the chat if you want to look at it. From Maryland. Please introduce yourself. Tell us a little about what brought you to YouTube.
What brought me to YouTube? I actually used to run a channel a while ago that was more of a like Second Amendment prepping type theme channel. And I was always pretty politically active. And then I just decided to go more on the political commentary and kind of mini documentary side and just kind of got back into it. And just been on the last few months in the live stream circuit. So this is my second one of the day, actually.
All right. Well, we hope that you enjoy it because, it's been, especially with number 80 in the chat, we always get somebody, I always get put off guard by his comments. So how about, Alex, you had a pressing issue that you wanted to open with?
About Bob Corker. He's jumping back into that Senate race. How do you feel about that?
So
well, he might jump back in. He hasn't confirmed, but that's good on the street.
Are you guys familiar with Bob Corker? I know number 80 probably heard of him.
I've heard of him, but I'm not really familiar with a guy like that. I know. Aren't you a fan of his though?
Yeah, I'm his biggest fan.
He's the last fan of him.
The last fan. The last of a dying breed.
So what's the reason why Corker got into the race, Alex?
So this is what's happening. There was a poll released by a Republican polling firm that had our Democratic opponent, Phil Bredesen, who was our former governor, beating Marsha Blackburn by 2 points. I mean, obviously that's within the margin of error, so it doesn't mean that much. But like, that's uncomfortably close of a Senate race, and this is Tennessee, and Republicans usually knock it out of the park pretty easily here. And the Republican establishment started panicking. So they're trying to get Corker to come back into the race because Marsha Blackburn is a hardline Trumper, and she's kind of crazy.
Okay, Tom, you're from a pretty blue state, but
it's horrible here, man.
Yeah, what's your reaction to Bob Corker, Mr. Iran, Mr. Obama's my homie guy? I mean, what do you think about him getting back into the Republican race?
I don't know. I think that it's pretty typical. I mean, there's definitely a almost like Cold War in the Republican Party, and there kind of always has been. I think you've always had varying factions, and it's kind of a thing on the right wing. You tend to have a lot of little faceted groups, but right now I think it's really stepping up with the establishment Republicans and kind of the populist realm, the Trumpite types. So it just seems like a typical play. You know what I mean? That it's kind of going on. We'll see what happens with it. It's not a topic I'm super familiar with. I'm sure Alex is probably, being from his home state, is probably a little more versed on kind of the differences between the actual candidates. But we'll see what happens with it.
I think to touch on what you said about the whole, what's the word, like civil war, I think what happened with the Republican Party is because the Democrats pulled so hard to the left lately, a lot of former like blue dog Democrats joined the Republicans, and then you have libertarians running as Republicans. So you have three different coalitions basically.
I 100% agree. I think, and I said this before, it's you had the Kennedy Democrats, you know what I mean, the New York business Democrats, and as the left pulled further into the more far left social issues, it's kind of pushed those people into the Republican side. So now you have a really like right-wing nationalist side. You have a libertarian kind of like Liberty Caucus, Rand Paul side, which politically, I'm more with. I actually preferred Rand Paul early in the primaries, and then kind of moved to Trump towards the end, for different reasons. But and then, like I said, you have that establishment kind of neocon, neo-lib, which is they're pretty much the same thing anyway. So it's fractioned. And I said I think that the biggest issue, and I was talking about this on a stream earlier with the Republican / right wing, is that the self-criticizing and the fact that because people generally on the right are a little more, I think, politically involved as far as like understanding what types of governmental policies and as far as what type of political factions are out there, where generally people on the left are just kind of on the left. There's not too far to go. It's socialism, communism. There's not really all that much political difference. So I think on the right, you have a lot more infighting. You have a lot more disagreement over policy, a lot more disagreement over just social issues and such. There's not a lot of unity. So you kind of have that, naturally speaking. It just kind of comes with it. And you see that not just here in the States, but kind of all over the world, really.
You said you voted for Rand in the primary?
Yeah, originally I did. I really like Rand Paul, and I still do. I love Rand Paul. I think that I like his policies, generally speaking. But for me, I felt like as it kind of got further down the line, I felt like Rand Paul wasn't radical enough. I don't think he was going to make an effective change. I think that you need, while I would like his policies to kind of reign home in the United States long term, you know what I mean? Kind of end the war on drugs, stop foreign intervention, stop overseas wars, low taxation, pro-gun. However, I don't think that he was the type of person that really could have went in there and went balls in on the Democrats and really kind of hammered the agenda. I think he's a little too soft-spoken, and I feel like you needed somebody that was really going to like stir things up and create a climate of, chaos. I feel like sometimes you need chaos with order.
Yeah, I think that kind of mirrors my own experience with the 2016 election exactly, because I started off in 2012. I was a huge Ron Paul supporter, and I like his. I grew to think that his son is also. I think his son is actually even an improvement on Ron Paul's policies. I do want to hear from number 80 though. You're not a conservative at all. So, am I correct or am I?
Oh, you're correct.
So, from the standpoint of somebody from the outside, would you say that it makes a difference whether you have somebody from the Republican establishment, the corporate Republican Party, like Corker or Mitt Romney, or as opposed to a populist like the type that me and Tom would probably be supporting?
What's funny? I actually wanted to ask you guys a question, if you don't mind, real quick. Do you guys feel like the Republican Party is kind of like drying up, as in they don't have enough new blood?
No, I feel the opposite. I think that it's not a matter of new blood. I think it's a matter of there's too many different streams within it. Yeah, that's the real issue in my opinion.
I think there's plenty of new blood. I mean, you have Rand Paul, Tom Cotton, Justin Amash. I know he's an independent, but if he were to ever run, would probably run Republican. I think that there's plenty of young new blood with a lot of good ideas. Oddly, I think the Democrats are drying up. Really, I mean, I think they're stuck in that neoliberal kind of spectrum. With them, it's either old school Pelosi style and Schumer style neolibs, or you're stuck with far radical left young people.
But are the new guys going to get that push? That's the real question.
What's the push? What to define that?
You got to get McCain.
Like, are they going to? Are they going to have the support of their party? Are they going to get that push from their party? Because that's what it's really about.
I think it's not really a matter of the party as much as it used to. The party is definitely important, but I don't know if I speak for Tom here, but I don't consider myself a Republican. I consider myself kind of a free market economics advocate, and a civil liberties advocate. And the party can die and fall off a cliff for all I care, because they haven't safeguarded any of the liberties. They went along with in expanding the surveillance state. I didn't vote for George Bush when I got the right to vote in 2004. If I would have voted, I probably would have voted for Ralph Nader back then. So Tom, would you can,
I hate the Republican Party. I mean, I hate both parties, but I mean, to me, it's the the fact that the Republican Party is the one that generally focuses on the issues that I am most true to. But I mean, the Republican Party, I mean, let's be honest, what's the difference? I mean, really the difference between the Republicans and the Democrats at a base level, if we're talking party policy, is guns, weed, and gay marriage. I mean, that's really like that's really what it is. There's not much of an issue. They both want to go overseas and start wars. I mean, they both want to tax you. I mean, it's all the same issues. It's just in varying degrees and varying levels. And I mean, one can make an argument that the left generally is more warmongering than the right these days. I mean, if you go back between, from Obama's 8 years to now, I mean, there's been far less war hawking, I think, personally.
I mean, 80, you've also said you don't like either party either. I think that there's kind of a comment, and Carlos, who isn't on the stream today, but who we have frequently, I mean, he's very dissatisfied. He's a progressive. So, I think that people who are observing from the outside of the party structures, we all agree that, people who actually want to change the reality as far as, the war on drugs and the interventionism overseas and all of the topics that Tom talked about, they're kind of locked out of both parties because of lobbyists.
Yeah, and I think another major issue I didn't bring up was that probably is fundamental between the two parties is immigration, and that's obviously something that I've been serious about for quite a long time, even before this more modern push with the Trump era. But that's one thing, and it's kind of ironic because if you go back in history, the Democrats pushed immigration control just as much, if not more. It's just kind of once they figured out that it's a voting block and in that identity spectrum.
Got to get those Latino votes.
Yeah, exactly. Once they started really pushing the cultural Marxist kind of ideologies with the oppressed oppressor kind of narratives, they could use that as a voting block, and now they're shifting their tune. So that is a fundamental difference. And that's probably, quite honestly, arguably one of the most important issues right now.
Cultural Marxism is a real threat, man. I'm terrified.
Can we get your reaction? Hold on, before Alex has to leave. AD, can we get your reaction to the debate yesterday? I know that you were talking about it.
Oh, man.
Did you go back and watch it?
No, I watched the whole thing, but I actually fell asleep listening to that shit. But because I was trying to listen to as much as I could, but I just dozed off. But I mean, the only thing that I found like really, really, well, I mean, aside from your argument in general, but the article that you presented, a lot of the things were conducted with surveys, and there were small sample sizes in the surveys. And another thing too is that they provided a lot of statistics, but they also never gave you a sample size. So it's like, 95% of these people did this, but it never gives you 95% of what number. So it kind of makes you kind of skeptical about like, okay, like what are we really dealing with? Also, it gives you like this general kind of like a dumbass thing, like, people from the age of 8 to 13 don't want to talk to their parents about watching porn. Of course not. They're fucking children. Like, they're fucking kids. Like, who the fuck is going to say like, oh, mom, like, I was in there watching Real Sex on HBO or Real Tales of Hookers or whatever the fuck that shit was called.
Yeah, but I found also that from what I read, and maybe I didn't read the whole thing, but it kind of assumed that the whole problem with porn is on men, but increasingly nowadays women watch porn also. And I mean, not to, because Tom didn't see it, but I think you really are going. Next time we discuss it, you really have to make the case for policing people who are wanking with tissues in their basements.
Next time I discuss it, I'll hit the Me Too movement and all of that.
The Me Too movement? That's funny.
I
mean, you gotta really sell this shit though, because you're not selling it. You just kept saying it ruins families, and alcoholism ruins families. Gambling ruins families.
Yeah, it didn't move. It didn't ruin the Gambino family. They made lots of money off of porn in the 70s and 80s. So
even somebody can argue that gun. Even people can argue that guns can ruin families. Like you can say some stupid shit like, the school shooting that happened is not stupid, but the school shooting that happened right now did not ruin a family?
Yep.
Exactly.
I mean, it did. The same thing. I mean, there's no argument on that.
It ruined a family. Yeah, exactly. It ruined the family, and one can say that it ruined the family because it took the life of an innocent person, and that's much more worse than somebody who can't fuck or keep their dick in their pants, right?
Yeah, what do you say? Yeah, go ahead, Tom.
So I didn't hear your debate, but here's an art like a thing where how I balance being a kind of anti-statist in one way, but being wanting a socially cohesive like country that has like good social morals is like I don't think the state like I guess I'm assuming one of you was arguing like against porn. One was saying
yeah, I think government should ban it.
Yeah. Okay. So here's my thing with a lot of these issues, these social issues, whether it's porn or gay marriage or pick one, right? Is whatever you disagree with, is that the state doesn't have the right to regulate people's individual lives if you're not hurting another person, right? If you're not committing acts of violence against somebody or you're not abusing somebody's property rights. But this, and I believe you should keep the state out of that. However, as a society, we can create social standards, social norms, use social ostracism, shun people, and you can get a similar effect without using state violence to enforce that, right? And in a lot of things in society now that were never technically illegal, but were never done really, were kept at bay by social ostracism. I mean, single motherhood or having children out of wedlock was never something that the state regulated. However, it was very rare back, pre-1960s and such, or a lot more rare than it is now because people were shunned. There was social ostracism. It was something you weren't, was not tolerated within families and within community. And you can have the same goal and get the same effect without using the state effectively. That's kind of my argument for those kind of issues.
What I was proposing was that you to watch porn you need to get a permit, and then that gets put on and then hold on, everyone can see your name on that registry, so like you get socially ostracized that way. That was my idea.
All right.
Yeah, I don't know if that
what do you think about that one?
I don't know, man.
I'm just wondering.
There's real issues.
I mean, I agree. It's
something
something that's negatively affecting, like you state, families, birth rates, everything else. But I don't know that I agree with making registrations for porn. I don't know.
But is it affecting people seriously enough to the point?
Yeah, absolutely. There's been multiple studies of how it literally destroys marriages. I mean, I don't know. Yeah, it creates a porn. There's actually a scientific study that was done. I can't quote it right now, but I remember reading this, that it actually changes the brain. It actually creates a neurological change in the brain.
The dopamine release, right?
Yeah. Well, what happens though? This is the science in the brain. So you have this issue with like you get accustomed to having pleasure from watching these images that an actual woman can't fulfill. So as you go on and on and on and on and on and watch that, your brain needs more and more and more dopamine to be satisfied. So you have to watch harder and harder and harder and harder porn. That's why all the companies like Pornhub start with a free video and then they start charging you for like more premium content. Yeah. Because like they know what your brain is going to do.
It's basically like if you take like alcoholism, right? You build a tolerance, and it takes you have these dopamine receptors, and as you fulfill those dopamine receptors, they expand. Basically, is the layman's way to put it, and they expand, and you need more to fill them, and then as you fill them, they expand more, and it takes more and more and more effect, or more and more of the intake of whatever you're consuming to give you the same effect. And it does. A lot of people will spiral into like much more degenerate styles of porn or whatever. And then, there's a thing where your brain doesn't really understand that you're not actually engaged in sex with a woman while you're getting those dopamine drops. And
absolutely.
It does create, there's been massive studies done on this. It's very detrimental to a person, to a family, a marriage. And I guess
there's a ministry called Fight the New Drug. I have one of their T-shirts on the front of it. It says "Porn kills love, fight for love."
Yes, I believe you tried to use that as a source yesterday on Success.
But check this out. Let me ask you guys a question before Alex tunes out. Do you believe that this starts at a young age? Yes or no?
Yeah.
Tom?
100%. Yeah.
Okay. Now, during your teenage years, you go through.
Wait, I didn't understand the question.
No. Do you think that this porn addiction starts at a young age?
No.
No. I wanted these two to answer because they seem to be for it.
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay. So, because I know where you stand, it's like whatever. But during your teenage years, you go through a period in which you go through risky behavior, correct?
Yeah.
And during that period, it depends on whatever risky behavior that you, I guess, engage in. That's the type of activity that you're most likely going to engage in more. All right. So let's say the first thing that you did was you drag raced, right? You were a street racer. And basically when you street race, obviously you're going to get a dopamine release in your brain because of the excitement, the thrill seeking. That's the thrill seeking area of the brain. So you're going to get a heavy dopamine release. All right. So basically what I'm trying to tell you is that maybe it's not the idea that, oh, porn does all of this and it changes the way your brain works. It's anything. You even gamble at that age and it's still going to do it's going to give you the same effect because it's a risk-taking behavior.
Yeah, but that's the point, that it is an addictive behavior and it's going to create the same dopamine responses that a drug does, essentially. But
not
I guess
necessarily a drug though, because a drug is actually adding a chemical into your body. You get what I'm saying?
When I was a young guy, playing Call of Duty gave me dopamine, but it didn't like cause me to degrade women, and it didn't cause me to become addicted to videos that caused me to degrade women.
Well, you didn't get the expansion pack where you destroy the Vietnamese village.
Oh, yeah, right?
I have never played that. I only played Modern Warfare.
Oh, come on, I mean, you're the last to know about everything, man.
Hold on, Alex. So did that make you want to go out and shoot a school, since it caused dopamine release? Exactly, then, bro.
Yeah, they use the same argument against video games.
So not everybody is going to go out and then that watches porn. Not everybody that go out is going to say, you know what, fuck my wife. I'd rather just sit in the basement and beat off the Pornhub. It's not the case.
So I think we have like a good discussion. Although I would like to include some people. Yeah, I think that we really did miss that feminist shrieking harpy that we were supposed to have on yesterday. But so is everybody on for some time dedicating a stream for that, for like a sequel to the We Shall Overcome debate?
Back with you?
Who? No. I don't know. I mean, you figure that out, dude.
Only if you call it, you cannot stop the bukkake.
Hey,
only if that's the time.
Before I check out, I did have one other question because y'all were talking about the different aspects of the Republican Party.
Yeah,
did none of y'all vote for John Kasich in 2016?
Did what?
Did none of y'all vote for John Kasich?
I voted for John Kasich
in 2016.
Yeah.
No.
I did, but I realized after he was a sour grapes loser that the only redeem. So you see, when I went to that booth, Rand Paul he'd already dropped.
You actually voted for Kasich. You're being serious now.
Hold on a second. So I'm telling the story. So everybody was panicking that Donald Trump would basically give the election to Hillary, and Ted Cruz had no chance of winning in Ohio. So everybody in Ohio, because nobody gave a fuck about Kasich, nobody's seen him. He started the whole fucking algae tide in Lake Erie here. So people were like, we'll vote for Kasich. It's like, throwing a deer carcass in front of a tank or something. That was nobody really thought he would win the presidency. The guy he was dead outside of Ohio. So people went and voted for Kasich because they were against Trump. Then most of those people in November, and I just wrote an article about it for Hard Bastard News, which will probably come out tomorrow. In November, people voted for Trump in the largest numbers of any election since the 80s. So, John Kasich is like a paper contender. Nobody cares about him. Nobody's going to even notice when he's gone here.
I'm going to vote for him in 2020, probably.
All right, you can go to that victory party and rent a phone booth or something, because I don't know. I mean, nobody in the United States of America gives a shit about this guy who won't admit that he was like an empty treasure chest in 2016. I mean, both of you guys, Tom and 80, what do you think about John Kasich, if you think about anything?
I have no opinion.
We have a new guest.
John Kasich is one of those Kennedy-style Democrats I was talking about that moved over. I mean, he's pretty much a Democrat minus, kids being transsexuals. I mean, that's pretty much like.
He's been a Republican since the late 70s.
Yeah, but if you look at his policies, I mean, he's not. He's for. I think he was one of the few Republicans that came out in favor of like assault weapons bans. He's always been a very moderate. Fiscally, he's not a fiscal conservative. He's kind of in the middle there. He's definitely.
He has a balanced budget, though.
Yeah, that is true. Yeah, for sure. But I mean,
his balanced budget is balanced due to Medicaid funding from the federal government. It's not because John Kasich is a genius. But you know, we have a guest, by the way, a new guy. His name is. Are you?
You got me,
stupid
Adrian.
Opinion? Adrian. Okay, welcome. This is Alex. Alex, say hi. He's about to leave.
Hey, what's up, man?
What's going on?
Number 80 from LA.
What's going on?
And you know Tom.
Yeah.
What's up, man?
How you all?
I should check out now, so I am going to say bye. But tune in for the second coming, literally, when we talk about it. Have a good one, y'all.
You too.
Welcome to the Hellfire Club.
All right, so now that I think Alex would have liked this topic too, but LeBron James and Laura Ingraham.
Oh, Lord.
Anybody care to open that topic?
About LeBron James, how she told him stick to dribbling the ball.
Yeah, shut up and dribble. That was
Shut up
her
and dribble.
Yeah.
Man. I mean, it's this is the thing though. I mean, are we not living in America where you should be able to say whatever you want and you should be able to criticize people freely?
Mm-hmm.
Then I don't see the problem in what the hell she has with LeBron James.
My only problem with the celebrity politics thing is not that, of course, they have the right to have political opinions. And I think it's stupid when you make an argument that, like, just shut up and do your job, because if that was the case, none of us would be here talking, right? Because I don't think any of us have this as a full-time job. But I think it's that the media puts this extra emphasis on what they have to say, right? It's like, you know, when Leonardo DiCaprio comes out and talks about climate change, it's like, you know, you're an actor, right? Like, you're not a scientist. So, but the media puts it like he has some ultimate authority on a topic because of his celebrity status. And I think that's where it's not necessarily these people don't have a right to speak. Of course they do. It's that they shouldn't get some kind of extra, you know, emphasis on their opinion strictly because they're good at playing basketball or good at acting, you know?
Well, they also use this public platform as a way to talk about whatever that happens to be their ideology, if it's climate change or gun control or whatever. But at the same time, if you think about it, you're using your public platform, what is your job essentially, in order to advocate politically. Could you imagine if we did that at our jobs and whatever, you ended up on the news for some reason talking about your company and then you started trashing Donald Trump or whoever? I mean, you'd be fired in an instant.
Yeah, that's a valid point.
I have to say that I was trying to explain this. I think me and 80 discussed this on one of our streams where we talked about Kaepernick, that if I'm very anti-abortion, I can't just walk around my job and show people pictures of dead fetuses or walk around with a marijuana leaf T-shirt. And I think that I disagree very much with Laura Ingraham. What she was doing, she was using the title of her previous book, which was "Shut Up and Sing," referring to Dixie Chicks singer Natalie Maines. So that the racial element that people are attributing to it, I think that's kind of ignoring her entire career. That's what Laura Ingraham has been saying, that all celebrities should shut up. But what LeBron James also fails to understand is that he's feeding into Laura Ingram's, her whole tactic for this. So if it ends up being that she ends up selling whatever, more books that she can get, or getting some more viewers on her show from LeBron haters, she's going to make out very well from this. Also, I think he could probably make out very well in terms of, earning money. Not that he needs it. I mean, he's very wealthy himself. But in terms of his support here in the city, because I do live in Ohio, I think he's not at the level where people look at him as, a pillar of the community that he was early in his career. Like, more and more people I saw on the forums on you know, the local websites, they were saying, well, yeah, he should shut up. We don't care about what he thinks anymore.
But then again, where was he at when he said this? He wasn't at work. He was doing. Wasn't he in an interview with Kevin Durant?
No, it wasn't. It was actually as it turns out, it was with Carrie Champion. They were having a quote unquote interview while she was giving them an Uber ride. So it was technically a commercial for Uber. So it was. I think that his original, you know, quote, his whole thing is kind of fake and disingenuous. I don't think he really care. Maybe he does care about the politics, but you know, I think they're tired. First of all, of ESPN. Carrie Champion works for ESPN. In case people in the audience don't know, we have people from Australia who are watching, and you know, he's really, you know, there's plenty of people who will be LeBron fans thick or thin. But if you're talking about actually affecting the opinion of voters, I don't think he's doing much. But what do you guys think? Do you think it actually affects the way people think what LeBron James says as far as Donald Trump or U.S. politics?
Hold on, I got to ask you a question, though, real quick. How long are we going to push this narrative that just because somebody's a celebrity that they don't really, their feelings or whatever they're saying isn't authentic?
Oh, I'm not saying that. That's not what I'm saying. I'm saying strategically it's not going to matter for people. I'm saying he absolutely has the right to talk.
I think at this point, everybody has their minds made up. You know, I was talking about this earlier too, that everybody's picked their side pretty much. There's very few people in the middle anymore. And I think most people right now either are on the right or on the left. They're not moving. You know what I mean? They're just entrenching further into their respective radical ends. You know what I mean? More people are moving further left and further right. I think the lines have been drawn. That I don't know that there's too many people out there that are going to be swayed by something that a celebrity states, except maybe some young accolades, you know what I mean? Some people in their teens or whatever but the average voting age individual is not really going to give a shit.
I think it's really those people that can't make up their own minds. It'll be them that'll take the opinions of these celebrities seriously. But all in all, I think I agree with Tom. I think most people have made up their minds, and it doesn't make a huge significant difference.
Yeah, but I think that a lot of those people, like you're talking about, that can't make up, they're probably left leaning already, though. You know what I mean? If you're in that spectrum where you can't make up your mind and you're listening to celebrities, you're obviously kind of in that celebrity Hollywood culture and, you know, or at least immersed in that to a certain degree. And you're probably slightly left leaning to begin with. So I think that, you know, you're already on that end of the spectrum.
So you're going to land on the left end.
Yeah, one way or the other.
Yeah. I mean, I disagree with the spirit of what Ingraham, and I don't really agree with too many of Ingram's opinions on civil liberties, for example. But you know, I think that she's kind of speaking for people who are tired of celebrities talking out about politics. Now, you know, constitutionally, she's absolutely wrong, but she's voicing kind of the inner, you know, the inner reaction people have when they hear LeBron James, who, you know, he left. First of all, he did leave Cleveland for a long time, and you know, interest in basketball tanked during that time. When he came back, a lot of people had an adjustment period. For, you know, people basically, some people forgave him overnight, some people never forgave him, and all of the drama that surrounds the Cavaliers. And you know, excuse me if I'm talking about Ohio, but I don't think his opinion matters that much nationwide as much as it is supposed to matter here, because nationwide
is on your side.
What? Yeah. Thank you. Thanks for shilling for a company that doesn't.
I mean, we had the same thing here in Maryland too. I mean, with the Ravens, I mean, the Ravens are huge, right? I mean, people absolutely live, breathe, die Ravens football. And when they went over to England and actually went, not only kneeled for the national anthem, which agree or disagree, whatever you think, but went out of the country and did it, like, dude, there was massive backlash. Like, they couldn't get people in the seats for a few games. And I mean, you know, a lot of, like you were saying, I mean, people generally, I think, they don't have a lot of play nationwide, but they don't have a lot of play locally either when it comes to politics. I think the fundamental underlying thing is people are sick and tired of their entertainment being mixed with politics. I mean, I want to sit down and watch a football game. I want to sit down and watch a basketball. I don't watch basketball anyway, but if I were to, and sit down and just enjoy it. I don't want to have to deal with people's shit. You know what I mean? Like, I don't want to have to hear your opinion. Like, when I watch a fight, I want to watch the two guys fight. I don't want to hear them talk about what their political opinions are. Like, just fight. Like, save that for off the field. Save that for another time. Like, whatever. Start an NGO. Do something that way. I don't know. I guess that's where people's frustration is. I think is that they just want their entertainment to be entertainment. The country is so politicized. Like, people just want to escape, and then you try to escape, and you get it shoved down your throat again. And I think that's kind of where a lot of the frustration is, in my opinion.
Okay, number 80. I'll ask you a question first. So you do think that there's serious issues going on that these athletes are talking about, but do you think that there's just kind of a prejudice involved that is a block to what they're saying, or do you understand that, for example, I would have gone to see Black Panther this week. I did have my nephew's birthday, but everybody's like they won't shut the fuck up about it. That I'm gonna wait a couple weeks till people get bored, and then maybe I'll check it out. So do you understand kind of what the dynamic what dynamic happens when things get overly political with entertainment or sports, or do you think we're kind of spouting off about nothing?
But check this out though. In all honesty, if the media never would have picked it up, how many of us would have known that people were actually kneeling for the national anthem? Who would have actually gave a shit?
Nobody would have cared, but it became politicized. Yeah, once it became politicized, people were just done with it.
Well, the gesture was made in order to attract media attention.
And I agree with you on the Black Panther. That was something when they first announced it, I was excited. I thought it was pretty cool. I was like, it's a cool character, it's a cool storyline. But like once you start putting articles out that are saying, oh, white people stay home for the opening night of the Black Panther, give black people their safe. I'm like, fuck you. I'm not going to see that movie now. You know what I mean? Like, that's where I might, at least like you said, not for the first couple weeks or whatever. Like once you start going that route with it, it's like, no, like, can't we just have our entertainment? Can't we just enjoy things together? Like, do we have to make everything politicized? Do we have to make everything about race? Do we have to make everything about, all these different things? Can we just not have entertainment? Like, that's one of the things.
Tweet?
Huh?
Wasn't that a tweet? Like some lady tweeted that?
I read it within an article. I don't know that it was definitely a consensus, I think, amongst a lot of people.
I've seen a lot of different articles about that movie. A lot. It's unbelievable.
There was an article that I did a video on this. An article that came out was it was by NBC, I think, or CNN, one of them. Yeah, it was or New York Times. I'm sorry. Style section. It was who's allowed to wear a Black Panther mask, and they were making this argument that, kind of quasi making this argument that it's cultural appropriation for white children to wear a mask of a black character. It's like, that's so fucking insane. Like, where are we going? Where have we gone?
That's just the media pulling shit, though, right?
Yeah, it might be the media pulling shit, but I think there is they're feeding an actual public that does believe in that.
Go on Facebook.
Look, man, I'm gonna speak on behalf of the black people, and I'm the black community, and I'm gonna tell you straight up, dude. Go fucking see the movie. Nobody cares. Like, people are just happy to finally see a fucking movie where you're portrayed as a hero and not like some fucking slave or somebody who's been oppressed, and like we're really tired of being portrayed as just like some
12 years a slave.
12 years a slave, dude. Like, literally, I can give you like the past 2 years how many damn movies have came out between Birth of a Nation, 12 Years a Slave, the Detroit, the Selma. Like, I mean, think about it. All of these are just like these oppressive type storylines.
Yeah, it's funny because Hollywood makes these movies like thinking they're doing a positive thing, and it's like, you're not. You're just reinforcing this stereotype.
It's a positive thing, as in it's giving people a back story to the history. Like, people didn't know about Detroit. Like, a lot of people didn't know about Detroit.
Yeah.
But it's important to know these things, But it just depends on how you use the information.
Yeah, that's true.
Adrian, what about
that? I heard that when 12 Years a Slave came out and it ended up winning the Academy Award that year, apparently everybody that that voted for it hadn't even seen the movie. They just voted for it.
That sounds like there's a lot of movies that people do that for. Like
And
movies just barely come out and then they already are like have like awards and things labeled with them.
But like he was stating that this is something that is becoming, I mean, where there are a lot of people out there that do believe this shit. Like there's a Facebook page called The Root. I mean, go on there. Like there are people that literally, I mean, there's arguments. I saw an article in that, I think it was HuffPost or whatever, did one like, this is what Africa would look like if white people never showed up. You know, like flying space cars and stuff. It's like, come on, like, what are you doing? Like,
but then there's also a Facebook page with where there's a white consensus and they're saying that we should boycott this movie because it represents the Black Panther Party, which was a racist organization. Like, I mean, there's always going to be
I know
on both sides. You get what I'm saying? So it's like you need to just like find a cool little space in the middle and just like enjoy it.
That was my argument. That's what I'm saying. If we could just like stop this shit, like everybody just enjoy entertainment. You know what I mean? Like why do we have to why do we have to turn this movie about a fictional African nation that was created by two Jewish guys in the 1960s? Why do we have to turn this into some ethnic war over entertainment? Like it seems so counterproductive and stupid to me. Like, why did we have to go this way with it? You know, I thought it was a positive thing. I thought it was pretty cool. Make a superhero movie focused around a black nation, and black kids can have, you know, a superhero that they can relate to that looks like them, and awesome. Like that no problem with that. And then immediately it becomes this big political issue and blown entirely out of context outside of the entertainment world. And I think people are just kind of tired of it.
These sort of issues used to be like this sort of divisiveness. It used to be broken down between Marvel and DC fans, but now it's literally gone in to become gender and about race. It's ridiculous.
Yeah. DC sucks.
I can say that. I can say that, you know, I'm like, I think for me, this whole politicization of the movies personally started with Passion of the Christ, because I'm Jewish, and there was like a whole campaign, don't see Passion of the Christ. It portrays us as, you know, Christ killers. I'm like, look, you don't have to see the movie. Nobody gives a shit. Mel Gibson was making a movie based on his Catholic beliefs. And all of his other movies are fantastic. Now, if you think that he hates you, just don't see the movie. But you know, it's not the worst. It's not the worst thing that ever happened that Mel Gibson made a movie that makes us look not, you know, paints us in a bad light. And you know, unfortunately, I think his career was targeted from that. And you know, since then, I think that type of thing happens with people that offend one of the alphabet soup organizations. You know, it's really more about these pressure groups that use symbolic issues in order to create tension in society, and that's how they sustain themselves. They're not actually dealing with real community issues.
No.
So I guess you guys want to move on to the next topic, or we got Mitt Romney, but we kind of covered that with
Mitt Romney.
Oh, fuck Mitt Romney.
Exactly.
Mitt Romney.
Issue covered.
I think we can just stop it with that right there. Fuck Mitt Romney. End of conversation.
So we have people in. Wait, Adrian, what are you in? What state are you in?
I'm actually from Canada.
Okay, so we have an international consensus that says fuck Mitt Romney. I don't know why he's, you know.
I low-key wanted to move to Canada, man.
What's that?
I low-key wanted to move to Canada. I've been saying that since I was like, I don't know, like maybe like 3 or 4 years ago. I've been wanting to move to Canada. Should I do it?
Well, do you have a nice big winter coat?
I could get one.
You're going to need one if you come here. Also, we're more left wing than America, so as long as you don't mind dealing with more lefties.
I don't think I'll have an issue with that.
I don't know.
And we're all people now. There's no more women, men. We're all members of people kind now.
The personhood.
Personhood, exactly.
It's fucking whatever. Like, I mean, you're just a person. It's like whatever. You're a person, man, female, black, white, Asian. It doesn't matter to me. Like, it's whatever. You're just everybody's fucking people. And I think, like, I don't know, man. This whole thing, like, it's just so weird, man. How everybody's just so fucking worried about other people. Just worry about yourself.
I think that's fair. It seems like the government always wants us to worry about everybody else now in the media. That seems to be the problem. I'd love to worry about myself, but it seems every day I'm told I have to worry about everybody else.
I mean, it depends. I mean, yeah, worrying about yourself. And I mean, but the thing about it is if let's say a particular group or whatever that you're belonging to falls under some sort of hardship or something like that, and you feel like there's some sort of injustice, then speak on it, you know? And I mean, if there's enough data and enough evidence to back up your claim, then I feel like it should be addressed. I mean, but you got to come to the table. You got to come to the table with something. Like, you can't just come empty-handed. But I wanted to ask Tom a question real quick.
Sure.
Okay.
Tom, you were talking about earlier your stance on immigration, right? Like, what is that? What is your stance on immigration?
Me, I personally, I definitely support like a border wall, and I 100% support shutting down all immigration for at least 10 years. I think going back to a pre-1965 style immigration where you have waves, where you allow X amount of immigrants in, and then you shut it down for 10 or 15 years, and then you reopen the pool. Because if you look at what happened in the United States, where you had these continuous waves of immigration, you've had a complete breakdown of where people would acquiesce to the society. You're creating societies within society, and you're basically balkanizing the United States. And you used to have a wave where, you would have, say, an immigration coming from Poland or whatever, and the first generation would kind of settle, and then in order to do business, in order to actually get a job, in order to be a part of the community, you would have to learn the language, you would have to learn the customs, the culture, you would have to adapt to that. If you didn't survive, you didn't thrive. And then what happens now is you're getting these giant waves come in, and you're having complete communities of immigrants set up where they do not, and even their children do not acquiesce. Their grandchildren, in some cases, do not actually acquiesce to American values, culture, society. So at that point, you're just the world's, hostel, the world's apartment building. It doesn't work.
So you're afraid they're not assimilating?
Absolutely, yeah. And data has shown that.
Well, I don't know. I mean, see, this is the only thing I hate about. Look, and I don't know. You could agree with me or you could disagree with me, but I had to take a research and methods class for whatever the subject is that I'm studying in school. And what I've noticed is that they're always going to find data that supports your argument. You're always going to find data that goes against it, because science is always falsifiable. And the thing about it is, like you said, that I'm pretty sure there is data that says that, but there's also data that says that although the first wave of immigrants are actually assimilating, the second wave is actually fully assimilating. And it depends on your definition of assimilation. I mean, like, I know one of them, obviously, you said is learning a language, but also being able to have a job, owning a house, and things like that. And those are things that a lot of these immigrants are actually doing.
And I look at it too as more long-term effects too. And also, as far as data, just empirically, I mean, you can take Baltimore City, for example, where you had these cohesive black neighborhoods now that are Mexican grocery stores, and they've basically just pushed the black community out of these neighborhoods by just mass immigration into it. And not only that, we're looking at already the United States is at a 350 million population. We don't need more people. You know what I mean? You have to think long term. Why do we need all these people? I mean,
I have a funny question. Ramon and Tom, I don't know about Adrian. I don't know if it reached all the way over there. That'll be pretty interesting. Is there a Chinatown in Baltimore? I mean, Maryland.
We don't really have a big Asian migration into this area. You don't see like Chinatown now.
All right. What about
Yeah, we have one.
You have one?
It's not that big though.
Adrian, by any chance, is there a Chinatown in Canada?
Well, in Canada they have in
They have a
Toronto
huge Asian population.
and Vancouver.
There you
Yeah,
go.
actually, on the West Coast, there's a lot. It's a big Asian population over there. But yeah, even where I'm from, in Ontario, we which is like more middle, we still have a lot Chinatown in Ottawa.
Yeah, I mean, I just wanted to know because like he was saying how they settle in areas and things like that. Because we in LA we have a Chinatown, Koreatown.
Yeah, Baltimore's actually like 84% black. It's predominantly black city. Like
yeah. Baltimore's and then we have a little Armenia, a little Ethiopia. Fucking the list goes on. We have a little everything.
Yeah, and people have this thing in this argument that they make where like America's a nation of immigrants, and that's true. I mean, we're all obviously immigrants here, whether intentionally or or voluntary or involuntarily. However, America formed its own kind of cohesive culture through the 1800s and early 1900s, and then when you saw that wave in the post Hart-Celler Act of immigration, you really saw that fabric break down. And you started to see all these kind of balkanized cities, balkanized communities that I don't think were necessarily there in those kind of droves. And also immigration prior to 1965 was strictly or almost entirely from Europe. So you basically had pan-European immigration where people had shared Western Christian values. I mean, it was even it was when it was more extended to Eastern Europe that you started to have a lot of this balkanization as well. But when it was strictly like Western Europe, you had a lot of the same culture, at least. I mean, you have very different, French versus, German, but all of these people basically shared that same pan-European, Western, Christian, overall societal norms, so to speak. And I think that immigration causes conflict. I think it causes infighting. It causes hostility in communities. I don't see a net positive from it. I don't see how it's positive.
Well, I have I have no problem with immigration when it's merit based, first of all. But another factor that I don't think it really goes towards what Tom's saying, but education has changed since the 1960s and multiculturalism has been introduced. I have no problem with anybody coming in from Africa or South America or Asia, in moderate numbers, not in emergency numbers, but we can't have different standards of education for different ethnic groups. It's really, back in past generations, there were schools that were established for example, in Pakistan that were based entirely on classic British liberalism and the public school. They call it the public school. It's not what we think of, and it was very successful there in creating leaders and people that could be statesmen. And instead of embracing that type of track record here in the U.S., we go for an education system that emphasizes people's differences and even pits them against each other. So I don't know if anybody agrees with that, but that's my take on it.
Yeah, I mean, I think the education system is a problem as well. I mean, just in a whole broad spectrum. But I think you have to first understand that not all cultures are created equal. I don't care what anybody, people disagree with me. I mean, a Middle Eastern culture and a Western European culture, or a Eastern Asian culture and a West African culture, they're not all the same. They have different values, they have different social norms, they have different standards within that culture itself. So when you bring all of these different cultures together, you're going to have conflict. You're going to have clashing. I mean, you're seeing this within Europe itself now. Europe is very socially liberal, respect for women, respect for individual rights to a certain degree, not so much as in America. And then you start importing North African and Middle Eastern migrants, and you're seeing a massive clash where one culture finds it completely acceptable for men to be sexually assaulting women. You know what I mean? It's not as a taboo, as much of a taboo as it is in Western societies. And when you have droves of these people come in, and what is America, about 1 million a year of immigration? I mean, like I was saying about the numbers, if we continue that 50 years from now, no one in America would have a baby. We could all stop all Americans having babies, and you're still at 400 million just in 50 years of immigration. It's like, as we've seen this increase in immigration and especially multicultural immigration, you're seeing race relations at an all-time low. I mean, maybe not all-time, take that back, but at least since maybe what, the mid 1990s. I mean, we're at least since the Rodney King era, we're at the worst time. You're seeing more clashes between ethnic groups. You're pitting very different types of people together that have very different wants and needs. I mean, that's another thing too. Different cultures and different groups of people have different wants, and not all of those align. You know what I mean? It can be very against each other. Not only that they don't align, they just oppose each other, and then we constantly infight.
Okay, before we go back to 80 with your reaction on that, Adrian, can you give your opinion on how that's affecting Canada?
Well, right now, we're having a large demographic change. And actually, in my neighborhood alone, over the last few years, we've seen a large influx of Muslim migrants. And I've noticed that since then, there's a lot more young girls that are going around that are covered up. There's a lot more women that are around and covered up. And at that same time, none of them, I think, and it's probably due to how fast we bring in the immigrants these days. But I do agree with Tom that they're not really assimilating the same way they used to. Because now we're hearing things, well, number one, female genital mutilation is on the rise in Canada, and that's only happened over the last few years since we have brought a large migrant influx. Another thing, especially coming from a citizen's perspective, it can be really frustrating because right now, the average immigrant in Canada makes, between all the benefits, I think it's around $3,600 a month. And even when I think my best job that I've been able to get so far in my life, I still brought in maybe $2,000 a month. So without having to work, it's kind of frustrating to see some immigrants that are able to have a better living than myself. And these stories are becoming a lot more commonplace up in here. So we're seeing a large demographic change. And because of that, we are seeing certain things that are, well, let me give you an example. My prime minister said that it is the job of Canadian citizens to assimilate to Islam. Essentially, it's our job to accommodate Islam. It's not Islam's job to accommodate. It's not Canadian Islam who has to accommodate Canada. So these are, I find, with the large immigration change, we're seeing these sort of problems come in. So it's possible that perhaps, David, you were saying that there's the second generation of immigrants that tend to assimilate. This may be possible at one time, but I think as we're seeing such a large influx, there's no longer any of that. I actually think that we're seeing in Canada our values starting to change because of it.
Okay,
it depends. What's your definition of assimilation, though? Like, because the thing is, let me understand a clear-cut idea of what assimilation is. Because I mean, for the most part, of my idea of assimilation is finding a job, speaking the language, owning a house, eventually starting a business. I mean, those are some clear-cut indicators of assimilation. I don't know.
To me, the definition, what's more important to me is you adopting the values. I mean, adopting the values of free speech, of personal self-defense, of a central focus on individual sovereign rights, sovereign liberties. You're importing cultures who have no respect for that whatsoever. It is contradictory to their fundamental values. I mean, within Middle Eastern cultures, there is no respect of individual sovereignty of all citizens. That's not something that is taught, advocated, or acceptable. I mean, women do not have the same rights as men within that culture, and you're not going to get that to change. And when you import 10,000, what is it in Minnesota? I think at one wave it was like 10,000 Somali immigrants. You're not going to have that. Children are born into these families and they're in communities where that's all they're around. We're used to have an immigrant population, 300 or 400 would move into a city, 500 into a city. Their numbers were so small that they were forced to go out into the broader community and out into the broader society, economic society, and actually interact. And they would adopt our values, where that is not happening at the same capacity that it did back then.
I would say even in a minor capacity, when we're talking about assimilation, learning the language, there's a number of parents who use their kids as
interpreters.
Won't bother. As interpreters, they won't bother learning the language because of it. And I think this is just like a very simple thing you can do in order to help live a better life in your new country. But a lot of people don't seem to want to be able to go this far.
Yeah, I would never move to Poland unless I learned basic Polish. I mean, I just wouldn't do it. You know what I mean? It makes no sense to me that you would want to come to a nation and not even learn its language unless you're just trying to use that nation. I don't, you know what I mean? Like that's a fundamental respect to me.
And another one I would say is that a lot of times what we're hearing too, it's coming from all over the world. It's not strictly maybe America, Canada, but is, for instance, in court cases, we hear some immigrants who did something. For instance, I think there was one in Australia maybe last year where a migrant raped a girl, and then he said, well, it was okay where I came from. So a lot of them, they want their interpretation of the law and their interpretation of what's right, what's wrong. They want to be able to bring it over here, and then that's okay. They want to even sometimes want to be able to circumvent the law. Hell, in up here, we've had some the Islamic community has even been pushing, saying that they want to be able to, in some minor capacity, they want to be able to use Sharia law to dictate. For instance, in a civil law situation, divorce, they want to be able to be dictated by an imam under Sharia law.
I thought there was big pushes for that in Britain as well, of pushing for Sharia courts.
But don't Muslims the only way they get one of the ways they get divorced is if the husband divorces the wife, like he just says, I divorce you like 3 times or something like that. Isn't it something along that nature?
Well, even what I've heard before is, like, again, when there's been talks about it by our government, they say, well, it has to be agreed upon by both parties. But it's kind of hard when one party, you know, like in the past, Islam, women testimony is worth half of that as a man or something like that. So, and when a man kind of dictates the woman's life, it's kind of hard to get an agreement on both parties, you know?
No.
My biggest thing is and this is the thing for a lot of things that we talk about. And there was something else I wanted to ask you earlier too, 80, the same effect. Oh, even with the porn thing, like, what benefit does it have? Like what is it that, say, this mass immigration, what is the positive aspect?
What positive aspect does it have? I mean, for the most part, I live in LA, which is a very immigrant, it has a very high immigrant population. And the one thing that you notice is that a lot of these people are taking jobs that people don't want. You get what I'm saying? Like, I mean, like, I'll give you an example. In the 1980s and early 1990s, there was a huge amount of people that did landscaping, right? And a lot of these people were black. Now, a lot of people moved on from that and did other things. And a lot of the Hispanics came in and then took those jobs. But at the end of the day, we didn't want them. Also, there's a lot of farming jobs in California in general that a lot of people don't want. I actually have a friend who is a legal citizen, and he works at a farm. He picks fruit or whatever, and what happens is the farmers are required to offer those jobs to American citizens first. They put out ads. They're supposed to go out there and really push for American citizens to have these jobs. They don't want these jobs. They really don't want these.
Huh? I have two questions on that. One, if the immigrants weren't there, right, what would they have to do? What would these farmers have to do in order to get people to fill those jobs if they wanted human beings to do it?
You said human beings? Wait, what do you mean?
Because I'll get to my next question. But what would they have to do? What would these farmers have to do in order to get Americans to take these jobs?
I don't know. I mean, they've apparently been trying to do it, but
they'd have to pay them more, provide benefits, and create a better system of employment. And then also, don't you think in a way that cheap imported labor is stifling technology and creation?
I mean, of course, but the thing is, here's the thing. When I was discussing this with my friend, as I said, I was discussing it with my friend because I wanted to get a really good understanding of it. I don't like jumping to conclusions. I don't like half-ass like answers and shit like that. So when he's explaining this to me, I mean, he gets pretty decent. He lives in like if you're living in California and you're able to stay afloat with whatever job you got, you're getting paid pretty well. California is expensive as hell. So he works this job. He makes pretty good money. But the thing is that what he's realizing is that a lot of the American citizens, they don't want to do the labor. It's very, very strenuous labor, and they don't want to do it. So
I don't disagree at all with your stance at all. That, you know, of course, Americans don't want to do the job. My argument is that eventually, with less immigrant labor, it would come sooner. Eventually, these jobs are going to get mechanized. I mean, there's no reason why we can't have machines picking tomatoes. Like there really isn't, other than the fact that currently it's cheaper to use immigrant labor. But I think fundamentally, eventually, technology is going to replace. I mean, there was an article that came out stating that even within white collar jobs, within 20 years, 30% of those jobs are going to go to whether it's algorithms or robotics or whatever. And I think eventually robotics are going to take that job. And now what are we going to do? Now we have this mass imported population that we don't have jobs for them either. So you kind of think long term on this. It's not always just about like, you know what I mean? Right now, it's like 40 years from now, what are we going to do?
But we've already had a glimpse of that with the recession. A lot of people left. A lot of people left. Like in LA, we had a huge like part of the immigrant population actually leave. There was a lot of people that left. And there was people actually doing shit to actually get deported. Like they were like, you know, they were kind of like in a way turn themselves in to go back home because there wasn't anything out here for them during the recession. It was hard to find work. So we've kind of had a glimpse of it already. I mean, if it's they come here for what? They come here for work. If it's not here, they're going to leave. They're going to just go find it somewhere else.
Yeah, but what happens when they start to have kids and their kids are here, their kids are American citizens? You know, that first wave immigrant generation is gone. If we're talking 30 years from now, I mean, the people that are out there working the fields right now are going to have grandkids by then. So what happens then?
Well, all that is like, I mean, there's other angles to the immigration debate, even in California, which includes, you know, and Carlos is in the chat. He can't join today, but we've talked before about the homeless crisis, which he says is not really dependent on the immigration issue. But in any case, California state not utilities, but state services and welfare services do have to serve a lot of these illegal immigrants. And at the same time, California is undergoing a pension crisis. They're undergoing a lot of issues with, for example, the nurses union. And I think that sort of confluence of different pressures from the immigrant groups, from labor groups, and all that's a potent time bomb that's going to burst either on the left or the right, you know. And I think that's something that you know, I don't know if you experience that over in California, 80, but I hear about it all the time on both conservative and progressive networks.
About what, immigrant homelessness?
Not necessarily immigrant homelessness, but homelessness as a whole in California, in for example, Orange County. And I hear about 10 cities opening up in, is it Marin County or something? And
man, all you got to do is go to downtown LA, man. You want to see a 10 city? I'll take you to Skid Row. Go to Skid Row.
Skid Row's been, I mean, you know, whether it's acceptable or not, it's been like that for decades. What I've been shown are like videos of places, you know, that were traditionally, you know, middle class that just have tent cities cropping up all over them.
I mean, usually people that these tent cities are usually popping up in under freeway underpasses. They're also popping up in like maybe like streets that have like industrial factories there. They're not really like literally on like in like well-established areas. Like you're not gonna worry about like fucking tents popping up on Rosecrans, you know, like or in Beverly Hills, you know. You don't have to worry about that. Oh, Melrose, that's what I wanted to say. I said Rosecrans, Melrose. But the thing about it is, I've like I said, I've actually went down Skid Row a couple of times. I walked downtown all the damn time. We actually, when I was 14, we had to work at I worked at this place called Cleaning Green, where we were responsible for like cleaning stuff up, cleaning up the community, and we had to go to these hills. And in these hills, it was like a huge bunch of like homeless people, and it was like a lot of homeless Asians. And it was kind of strange for me to see it because I wasn't really familiar with like homeless Asians. I've never seen a homeless Asian in my life until that day. And yeah, that was the first time I actually ran into like a huge homeless Asian population. But for the most part, the most homeless people that I've actually run into are either black or white. A lot of them are also veterans. A lot of them are ex-veterans. You see a lot of those. And a lot of them, majority of them also have a lot of mental health issues. So that actually is also a factor that plays into it.
Yes. So my point being that if you're accepting a lot of people from foreign countries, and you know they might have health problems coming from countries like Guatemala that don't have, you know, I think we can all agree that Guatemala doesn't have the best healthcare in the world, for example. And, you know, they're dependent on healthcare. They're dependent many times on English as a second language education. So for a long time, I mean, Tom, I don't know if you agree with me on this, but you're basically in remedial mode in terms of their education, in terms of their healthcare, in terms of and that's if they're cooperative, just absorbing them into American society on the economic level. And then you get to the cultural issue. And I think that, you know, people have all sorts of beliefs like Jorge Ramos, America is a nation of immigrants or whatever. You know, I don't think that that's an immigration policy, saying that America is a nation of immigrants, because, you know, as President Trump did say, you know, Americans are dreamers too. I personally believe, you know, in order to help people, it's better to force their governments in their native countries to address those issues nonviolently. You know, not invade them, and tell them, you know, we're not going to be the relief valve for all of the social pressures that are going on in Guatemala or Dominican Republic or whatever country it is. You know, I'm welcome for, you know, professional immigrants to come from there. You know, people who qualify under a certain set of you know, standards and requirements. But, you know, emergency immigration doesn't create a harmonious society in the host country.
Immigration to me is a net negative. It's a complete net negative, because you're, like you stated, you're bringing in usually people who can't sustain themselves. They cannot provide for themselves. And I think Molyneux did a really good video on the welfare usage among immigrants, even down to the second and third generation, where actually I think when it hit the third generation, it went even higher than the first generation. It's a net negative economically on that end. And you talk about, you know, like the amount of money they provide to the economy, where they're using even more money in state resources in a lot of cases, maybe not every case, than you're providing. And like you were stating, there's two problems with it on how it affects other countries. One is that, yeah, we should pressure these countries to do their own thing, you know what I mean, and kind of be more isolationist in that way. But secondly, when you're bringing immigrants in here, you're fundamentally destroying the opportunity of that host country. So you're bringing the hardest working people, the people that have the most predisposition for risk taking and for investment, out of those countries, right? It takes a certain person with a certain type of tenacity and desire to succeed to illegally come across a border and walk their way into another country. If those people were able to be at the top tier in their countries and actually create and provide there, you would see an overall better system around the world, I think. And that's kind of my problem too with merit-based immigration in a way. While I do support merit-based over just visa lottery, with merit-based style immigration, you're taking the best people out of these countries, and you're just continually putting these countries in second, third world conditions by taking their smartest, their brightest, their best. And then also too, what happens, I think, and especially in like Canada's seen this a lot with the high Asian population coming in, is that you start having demographic displacement within the top tiers of the white collar industries and such. So right now it's affecting the lower end of blue collar industries. When you start going into merit based, you start having displacement of citizens and jobs and things in the higher end. So it's really just a trade-off at that point. I think if you're going to do merit based, it should be, we seek it out, right? We need engineers, and we don't have enough kids in college right now that are going to be engineers. So we'll go to, you know, whether it's Japan or India or wherever, and we'll
Nigeria.
Yeah, and Nigerians are actually, I think, the most successful immigrant population. They have the highest success rate as far as wealth and everything else. They're incredibly.
A lot of them are engineers too. I'm an engineer, so.
Oh, are you? Okay,
you know,
yeah. I wasn't. Yeah. I did not know Nigeria was big for that, but I did know that they are the most successful immigrant population from per country or whatever within the United States. But I think that we should seek those out. Versus just, you know, allowing someone because they have that type of degree or type of work history. If we need it, we'll go find it.
So before I want to, you know, I like this, you know, spontaneous immigration conversation. There are a couple more topics I wanted to cover today, but Adrian, do you want to comment a little? I did have a question for you. As far as Canada, is there like a specific concentration of the immigration issue as far as the provinces or the urban areas? Are there like areas that are hit harder in terms of economic problems, or some of these social issues that you're saying are cropping up?
That's a good question, actually. Well, in terms of demographic, it kind of varies. I've mentioned on the West Coast we had more immigration. More Asian over there. Lately, we've been having a large Middle Eastern immigration influx. This was when our new prime minister came in office a couple of years ago. This was part of his promise as the 2015 migrant crisis was hitting. He was promising to bring in more. So we have seen a large demographic hit. At the moment, I can't comment too much on how that affects like how much that affects the monetary wise. However, I have noticed that at least I was looking through some articles the last few days, and a lot of them seem to that have come in over the last couple of years, despite the fact they've even been here for a couple of years, they're still living on the government welfare. So that seems to be a problem right now. And as I was stating earlier, they're getting much more than I would say the average citizen does at the moment. But one thing that did end up happening here that was a problem, and this can go back to when we're talking about the tent cities, was over 2017, Trump ended up taking away the temporary protective status of the Haitians, and it was the El Salvadorians, I believe. And what ended up happening with that was a lot of the people that were in America, they ended up, they fled to Canada. So we actually ended up seeing right along the Canada-American border, we were having large influx of illegal immigrants. We didn't know what to do with them. So they were living in their tent cities. They didn't have any food, so the government had to give them food. At one point, we had moved over 1,000 of them into an old crumbling building that was the Montreal Olympic Stadium back in like the 1980s that has just been falling apart ever since. So in a sense, we created our own slums. So these became a problem. And then on top of that, people who were vying for legal immigration status, we didn't end up sending back any of these border crossers. So what ended up happening is they're now being funded by the government. They're being issued visas and citizenships. Meanwhile, people who are doing immigration through the legal sense, they're actually losing because of that reason.
Yeah, and I've heard a lot of the same points from in the U.S. from people coming from especially India and other countries, that their immigration process does take longer due to the just the clogged immigration system in the U.S., which there's a lot of people who get here illegally and then try to legalize themselves once they get here. I do want to turn to a topic that I covered in my last week, Keith Ellison. So for some context, I know we have two progressives in the chat, Carlos and Winkle the Bernie Bro, whose channel I actually watch. And Keith Ellison was the preferred candidate of the Bernie Sanders wing of the party in the 2017 Democratic National Committee chair elections, and he's in hot water right now because of his association with Louis Farrakhan. Now, I actually wrote an article last week where I said, I don't care, because people are saying Louis Farrakhan anti-Semite equals Keith Ellison anti-Semite. I don't care. Some people hate me. Sometimes I wake up in the morning, I don't really like me, but I think that that the real issue was his dishonesty about the relationship with Farrakhan. Because if you know Louis Farrakhan, he's very upfront about what he thinks. I mean, I don't know if you guys are Farrakhan fans. I do listen to his videos once in a while. What do you think about the deputy head of the DNC? He denied his ties with Louis Farrakhan in 2006. He repeated that he has not had ties with Farrakhan since the 90s. And then Farrakhan claims that he's met with him in 2015, that he's been revealed to have attended a dinner with him in 2012. Do you think this is really an issue for somebody like Ellison, who's in Congress and the deputy head of the DNC?
I think what's funny about this is, just imagine for a second that the head of the RNC or deputy director of the RNC had meetings with Chris Cantwell or Mike Enoch or Richard Spencer. like the media outrage on that, because we're talking about the same thing, right? We're talking about an ethno-nationalist who has anti-Semitic views. That's what Farrakhan is. He promotes ethno-nationalism and blames the Jews for all the world's problems.
Wait, he's also homophobic, and he's also, I mean, a lot of people.
Farrakhan's all right. I mean, that's, if you want to be honest, it's the same thing. So, like, while I personally don't have a problem like with Farrakhan, I don't have an issue with you. Have your views if you want. You know, your ethno state's not my problem. Whatever. I don't have an issue with him, but I just always look at the double standard, right? Because if it was someone on the right who was having private meetings with someone, or just a Republican was having private meetings with one of the prominent figures within the alt-right, you would see a media meltdown. It would be an absolute breakdown. You know, the shit would hit the fan, and this is completely just dismissed. And that's where I see the hypocrisy.
Actually happened, I think, last week with Congressman Matt Gaetz, who invited a ethno-nationalist to the State of the Union. So there's a freshman congressman who, he says that he didn't really know the guy very well. The guy requested the invite. I think, you know, again, like Tom, I don't, you know, I obviously wouldn't hang out with Farrakhan, but I think he's honest about what he thinks, and I don't care. You know, I don't feel threatened by Louis Farrakhan, but I think that the dishonesty is the issue here. Well, so number 80, I mean, you live in LA. You know, I think Farrakhan's main base of operations is in Chicago. Would anybody care about somebody like him being associated with like one of your congressmen over there?
I wouldn't care. I mean, like, here's the thing though. Louis Farrakhan meets with a lot of people. He has the most randomest meetings with people, and you hear about him meeting up with all kinds of random people, like Kanye West or like Rick Ross, or he'll meet up with a basketball player. He just has these random meetings with people. And I mean, it's just, sometimes it's just a talk. Sometimes it's just a talk like, oh, like maybe you could do something positive and put something positive in people's ears. But I think, like you said, I think where he messed up was where he denied it. Just be upfront about it. If you had a meeting with him, you had a meeting with him. Just say it. You know.
The issue here is that Louis Farrakhan is an anti-white activist. He is an anti-Jewish activist, but he's a really anti-white activist too. And people give him a pass on that. And I see Jews give him a pass on that too. And I don't, you know, I think that if we're going to be consistent, to be fair with this whole thing where you don't meet with members of the alt-right, well, then you can't meet with this guy, because like Tom said, it's a virtual mirror image of probably, I don't know, David Duke, you said Chris Cantwell.
Not even. I mean,
that's Richard Spencer.
Yeah, not even Richard Spencer, because Richard Spencer actually never comes out and says extremely negative things about other ethnic groups, right? Mike Enoch doesn't either. Jared Taylor doesn't. Jared Taylor's always respectful. Louis Farrakhan has advocated for his members to go out and kill 10,000 white people. That's why I compared him to somebody like Chris Cantwell, who's a little more radical and says more radical things. So that's even worse. Like, if we're talking on the rhetoric based on what they're advocating, what they're talking about, by no means is Farrakhan even comparable to like a Jared Taylor, right? Who is respectful of other ethnicities and doesn't really go on the whole hardcore, like, you know, the Jews kind of thing. Farrakhan is absolutely advocated for the use of violence and murder of other ethnic groups. So it's like that's mind blowing. You, like a statement you made. Well, he goes out and he has meetings with Kanye West and he has meetings with whatever and so and so. Imagine if Mel Gibson was going out and having meetings with you know, somebody not even as radical as a Chris Cantwell, just say a Jared Taylor. I mean, you would see an absolute media shitstorm over something like that. And that's the hypocrisy in it. You know what I mean? Farrakhan is probably one of the most radical ethno-nationalists in this country, in the public sphere, that is out in the public sphere.
I think
go ahead, Adrian. We haven't heard from you.
I was just going to say, I think the fact that he was willing to lie with his connection to Farrakhan shows that he knew that Farrakhan was a very controversial figure. So, well, in his personal life, I don't think you could necessarily judge him if he had relationship with them. If we are talking on a more professional level, I think he should be scrutinized pretty heavily for who he does go and associate with. So I think in that regards, he probably should have received some of the lashback.
Well, what I kind of like skimmed over it in the beginning, but the real issue is that Keith Ellison, when he first sought election in 2006, explicitly denied that he has any more connection to Louis Farrakhan. He claimed that Louis Farrakhan's ideas are kind of, they're beyond the pale for him, and that when he worked for him in the mid 90s, it was in order to organize the Million Man March. And as time has gone on, and his other, there have been videos of Keith Ellison saying stuff, and I don't care. I'm not a Democrat. I don't live in Minnesota. I think that I don't think Ellison's really up to snuff in terms of leadership, to be honest with you. But the dishonesty is the issue, in my opinion. And I think that, like Tom said, if this was a person on the right wing, the standards would just be totally different. And it's going to be interesting if, Alan Dershowitz, who I think I've criticized him a lot, because he says, oh, if Louis Farrakhan leads the Democratic Party, I can no longer be a part of this party. So he got elected deputy head. So now you want to be associated with, so that's kind of an issue that I see, that people, they're more interested in staying with their friends than they are with actually promoting an issue that's important to them. And that's why I think these political parties are more of a joke. I think that's why people like Tom are alienated. I think, I don't know about you, 80. I don't think you really want to be part of a political party, but these parties, they don't promote actual changes in anything. They promote kind of a circle of socializing between people that are at the elite level of society. So
I have a question.
Yeah, go ahead.
I think not even a question, my bad. This is a kind of a response. I think the reason that people will probably be more of I guess outraged if, like, let's say a David Duke or what did you say, Richard Spencer or whatever met with somebody on the RNC. I think people will be more upset about that is because, like, Republicans, I guess, have been getting this heat and have been attached to this label of like white supremacist or racist, bigoted people, right? So I think that's why if somebody on that side were to meet with somebody like that, I think it would just kind of like play along with the stereotype that they've been gilded with in a way.
Yeah, I mean, I can see your argument, but I mean, fundamentally speaking, I mean, if historically speaking as well, I mean, the Democrats have been far more, you know what I mean, detrimental. But I understand what you're saying. It's the stereotyping, but that's part of the problem as well, is the fact that stereotype exists, you know. And I get what you're saying, but never the men in an objective sense, when you look at it objectively, there is no difference. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and after, I've watched several of, I think Richard Spencer kind of is uninteresting for me, but Jared Taylor, I've watched a number of his videos, and he is very interesting. He goes out of his way to be courteous to anybody, and what I really notice is that he does say, I don't have any political home. It's kind of like I have my research, and that's me. I want people to like me for what I'm writing about, not about what flag I'm waving or whatever. So I think that's about it. We do have the Italian elections. Does anybody want to talk about Italy? I know it's a burning issue over in Canada, right?
I was going to say I don't know much about her.
So I'll introduce the topic. If you guys have a comment, go ahead. So everybody knows what the Brexit was, correct?
Yes.
Yeah.
So I predicted about, probably when the Brexit happened, that the next country that would reject Europeanism, which is connected to both immigration, multiculturalism, and lack of local control, would be Italy, because, Italians within Italy hate the control of Rome. They are very into their own culture and Catholicism, by the way. And they would just reject this whole, shit stew that they're serving from the European Union. And behold, I have from the London Financial Times The current prime minister of Italy is basically, about to eat a giant shit sandwich, as they say on South Park.
Ugh.
And they earned 40% in the last election. They're likely to earn 25% in this election. So the European Union, in my opinion, is on its way to falling apart.
Yes.
Italy is an economic superpower industrially in the north, and people laugh at Italy because of the backward South and because of all these stereotypes. But in order to make Europe work, you need countries like that. It can't just be Germany pulling the weight. 80, you live in California. You guys might decide one day, you want to be California as a country. Do you think that this is kind of what you're looking for, your own country?
No. I mean, I think honestly California could probably stand on its own, but I wouldn't want to see it just like, I don't know. Like, to me, it was stupid. I remember there was a talk of it that California wanted to be its own little thing, and I think it was like centered around Donald Trump. And I mean, I don't like the guy, but I mean, at the same time, I don't think it was good enough means to be like, yo, let's go ahead and make our own separate thing.
Yeah, but this is something you're saying. Oh, sorry.
That's basically it. But I don't really like you're talking about the Italians and upholding their own thing. I don't know, man. I have like literally no comment on that.
See, I think there's a difference too when you look at the EU and the United States. I mean, the EU is not elected. It's a bureaucracy that controls the sovereign governments of Europe. And right-wing populism is rising all over Europe. You see that with Poland, Hungary. You saw 15 seats being taken by the AfD in the German parliament. You're seeing right-wing populism rise in Italy and segments of France. And there's actually another guy on YouTube. I started following him a while ago. He's actually getting some pretty good traction. His name's Dr. Stephen Tully. And his big thing that he focuses on is the like right-wing populist traditional Christian rise of Europe and the return to, I guess, the old Europe, so to speak, as far as being a Christian-centered culture. And I think that this is a trend that's going to continue because as more North African, Middle Eastern migrants keep coming into these countries and people are seeing the fabric of Europe change. I mean, you have the big, in Sweden right now, the big real feminist movement. It's not the quasi third waves, the 128 decibels, where now women are just terrified to go jogging because of the amount of sexual assaults and rape. And you're going to see if finally people starting to reject this kind of mass migration. And I think Italy's another one that, like you stated, was going to eventually go. Poland and Hungary and Czechoslovakia have really led or the Czech Republic and such have really led the charge on this. And I think that once you had Poland and Hungary stand up to the EU and say, screw you, and Brexit kind of was, I guess, the initial spark to the powder keg, but really Poland's really taken the real stance and said, no, we're done. And I think you're going to start seeing other countries really start to kick into gear now. I think this is going to be a trend that we're going to see continue.
Okay, Adrian, your thoughts?
Damn, Tom, you stole all my thoughts, man.
Sorry.
Yeah, I don't think I can really add too much more to that.
So I do have a follow-up question to that. So, my thing, I started following this whole European Union issue a pretty long time ago, before I ever thought about commenting on YouTube or even blogging, when I noticed, Nigel Farage, I think Nigel Farage is one of the most underrated leaders in the world. And, one of the things that I thought about is maybe we're not like Europe here in the United States. But, for example, I wouldn't care personally, I wouldn't care if California adopted single-payer healthcare. I wouldn't care if, for example, they legalized, heroin in Nebraska. I don't know. So do you guys believe that this concentration of laws and the economic management at the top in Europe, do you think that that's also an issue here in the United States, or is that more of a cultural issue over there?
I mean, it's definitely becoming more of an issue here. I mean, America was built as a bottom-up society, where the EU was built from a top-down central control over the sovereign states of Europe, where the United States was built as basically sovereign control of by the state governments with slight oversight and regulation on international issues by the feds. And we're seeing that shift obviously has occurred over time, where this federal government's consumed more more power from the states. But it's a totally different dynamic. The system was set up entirely in the opposite direction. The EU was set up as a top-down control from the beginning.
How about in Canada? Is that an issue with Ottawa managing things federally?
Yeah, it's becoming definitely an issue, I would say. We're starting to see a lot of issues that were normally regulated by the province are starting to be taken over by the state, by the federal government. For instance, we're starting to have legalized marijuana over here, which most people want that to be regulated by the provinces, but the federal government's taken that over. Definitely, I would say up here, censorship is becoming a big thing by the government. Our government, because our newspapers are doing so badly, is about to buy them out, which means that they're going to have, more or less complete control over there. And then there's possibilities that Facebook is going to start getting regulated because our prime minister thinks that all the criticism is fake news. So we're actually having a big problem with state leadership at the moment.
So 80, I mean, I have one corollary to that. So California sanctuary state, do you think that that's is that something that you'd say is a good idea for California, or do you think that would you say that the federal government has authority over immigration in California, or should Sacramento be in charge of it?
I think the state should have the say in
So you do realize that could open. Tom could then say, "I want a border between Nevada and Oregon and California."
I said if I was going to say to you, if California has the right to keep illegal citizens and make them legal citizens of California, does now that give Texas the right to round up everybody and throw them over the Rio? I mean, that's the same argument. If you have the right to keep, does another state have the right to deport? Are we going to allow states to self-deport people out of the country, or do we allow the federal government to control?
But the thing is, with the idea of that is like, with what is it? The safe state. What is it?
Sanctuary state.
Sanctuary state. Oh, sorry, I'm kind of tired. A lot of the things are basically like they can't come into schools. And they don't want to allow ICE into schools and things like that. They don't want to. I think police officers have the option, if police stations have the option, if they want to collaborate with ICE as well. It's an option. It's not like they're forced. It's not that they have to. It's an option.
No, the California Attorney General has actually said he'd prosecute any law enforcement official that cooperates with ICE.
Holy shit!
Really?
Yeah,
that's funny because I know that I know that when it was under the sanctuary city, the law enforcement didn't have to, but if they wanted to, that was on them. Like they weren't basically trying to give them additional work on top of it. Like they're not trying to have them. Okay, you want me to detain these people for extra time? Like that's not my job. That's your job. You should be here on time to come pick up. You get what I'm saying? So they were trying to say, I guess, like, oh, that's not the law enforcement's job to be doing that. That it should be, ICE should be on top of that.
No, I mean, I have an idea then. I mean, if we're going to take criminals from other countries, why don't we send our criminals to Guatemala? I mean, it's the same idea. Isn't it Guatemala's responsibility to take care of their people, and then America's responsibility to take care of America's, legal standing citizens?
But don't you think that's a generalizing statement to say that we're taking in criminals as if like the whole population is like out there?
Are we not taking in criminals, or are we taking in only law-abiding people? Because
to be fair,
we are taking in criminals.
You can't say, okay, yeah, but is that the general population though? Is the general
population of what?
Is the general population of immigrants, are they criminals? No, you can't say that.
If you were a criminal in Guatemala, why would you stay in a country where you're wanted and the police there are seeking you out? You'd obviously go to a country where nobody knows who you are.
Bro, but most likely if you're a part of, okay, I'll give you the perfect example. All right. So you know that a lot of people from El Salvador, they're a part of the MS-13 gang, right?
Uh-huh.
And they're also part of 18th Street, right? We have gang units, gang injunctions, and things like that to actually pick these people up. So it's not like they're just sitting here and they're just like, oh, we're just going to be these little shadows hanging out in the streets and doing whatever we want to do. And this is lawless area. It doesn't work like that.
Yeah,
Like,
maybe not in California, but in Virginia now they have a huge MS-13 flare-up.
Okay, it's a big flare up, but is it as okay? Look, it depends on what you consider a big flare up, and on top of that, when did this problem actually begin to occur?
I mean, Tom, would you like to take that one?
I mean, I know here in Maryland, there's massive issues with Salvadoran immigrants and such. But my biggest thing, like going back to what was stated with the fact that, you know, they're choosing not to cooperate with ICE. Well, then my argument is, can Texas choose not to cooperate with ICE? Can, you know, the Dallas Police Department just deport on their own? Can they just round up, if they pick up an illegal immigrant, can they choose not to cooperate with ICE and just deport them themselves? I mean, that's the same argument. If we're going to allow individual police departments to choose whether or not they comply with immigration law, that goes the opposite way too. That goes the way of that police department then has the right to deport these people themselves. It's
or like what happened in was it Phoenix area where they had that crazy jail with Sheriff Joe.
Yeah,
and yeah, I mean then you know the idea that the federal government doesn't have the authority over immigration law, I think it opens up, you know, just a huge variety of options or problems.
Well, because you don't have one country, then you have 50 countries is what you end up with. Because
you have all those counties, you have thousands of counties.
Yeah. What defines a nation? A nation is defined by its borders. So if we just allow individual states to define immigration, then we really don't have a sovereign United States. We have 50 different states with 50 different sets of immigration laws.
Well, there was an article that came out just the other day that said that 90% of the people arrested in 2017 by ICE either had criminal charges that were laid against them or were pending criminal charges. Also, the thing is technically any illegal immigrant who has crossed the border is breaking the law because they're not going through the legal immigration system. Now, I wouldn't necessarily just say that they're bad people in that regards, that just because they've crossed the border, they've committed a crime. But there's a difference between an MS-13 gang member crossing the border and, say, a father who's bringing their kids over trying to find a better life. There's a big difference between that. But the problem with the sanctuary states, too, is the fact that you do have the rules and the laws in place for a reason. And now we have these states that are willingly going to circumvent that law. And one thing I've wondered is whether that means that other states, and whether this is going to break down into more local municipalities, whether that means that they're going to start whatever law they disagree with, are they going to start turning against it and saying, you know what, we're not going to follow that law?
Yeah, and the other argument I'd say is, you know, when there was the whole gay marriage thing, which it was voted on by states, including your state, by the way, number 80. Suddenly they decided the Supreme Court has to decide whether you know, the voters of California or Nebraska had violated the rights of these couples. And they said, oh, all states have to recognize gay marriage. Well, where was the whole, you know, local states' rights then? I mean, it's like suddenly every time that states' rights becomes an issue, it's because, we don't want to deport people. We want to have, you know, Ted and Fred marry or something. That's real. There's no consistency in it.
I think too, just to use a leftist argument for this example, is one of the biggest arguments against, you know, states controlling aspects of gun control is that, well, one state over here who has more lax laws, you know, allows, you know, whatever their gun laws are. And then the state next door has very strict gun laws. Well, people from state A with lax laws will just move the guns into the state B with strict laws. Well, then why does that not transform to immigration? If we have a state that allows sanctuary status or whatever, and that those people are coming into that state, what is preventing them then from moving out into the one next door? And you're circumventing that state's laws and that state's issue with, you know, the topic at hand. you're not, you know, without that federal oversight of some sort, you're really just, it's a just a den of vegetable conflict between states as well.
I guess that's kind of the risk coming from the American system. When you give more to the states, you're going to have that conflict in between.
Yeah, but immigration was never a state issue ever. I mean, the federal government always controlled immigration and regulated immigration. You know what I mean? That's what I guess, you know, back from the original aspect of the founding. I mean, immigration was always controlled by the federal government, and it's this idea that states now have that right is kind of new, I guess.
Do you think it's gotten to this point because the federal government hasn't fully addressed the issue of immigration?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, we've since the Hart-Celler Act was the last real change, and it was a very negative change, culturally, socially, economically on America, and we've never had real immigration reform. I mean, since then.
Yeah, it's been kind of convenient for people in the Democratic Party establishment. They want more immigrants in order to get more voters, and the Cato Institute, you know, corporatists on the right, you know, on some manner of the right, they're like, well, cheap labor, you know, hell yeah. So that they'll take tons of illegal immigrants for the slaughterhouses in Colorado and Iowa. And
both establishments want immigration, you know, for their own respective reasons.
Yeah. Well, these days it seems that at least the immigration is all about the votes, because at least that's what I think is going on in my country. Is the Liberal Party, and which is pretty much the Democratic Party, they've upped the immigration, but then it also is shown that they're putting them into areas where there are swing ridings between the Liberal government of the Liberal Party and the Conservative Party. So they actually, what they've been doing is they've been using the immigration to strategically get ridings into their favor. So what would be considered a purple riding will turn into, well, our color code is backwards, so red is our Liberal Party, so they would turn it from a purple into a red riding.
All right, so anybody, I think I'm ready to go, but glad to have two new guys. This is Tom Binns, B-I-N-N-Z. I subscribe to him. Can you say what the names of your channel is, Adrian?
It's just my stupid opinion.
Okay.
Yeah, I like that.
Thank you.
Adrian, I got one question before we head out.
All right.
Earlier, you were mentioning about the rise in female genital mutilation in Canada, right? Now, I wanted to know, is this being found in Canada, or is it something that is actually being done in Canada or practiced in Canada?
A little bit of both. There is some that is getting practiced in Canada, but what has also become a very commonplace is a lot of people who have immigrated here and they had their children here, is they'll go home to their native countries to visit, and then while they're there, they'll get somebody to perform the act on the child, and then they bring them back to Canada. And right now, our government, the Conservative government, has been having a bitch of a time fighting against the federal government, trying to get anything put in place. For instance, our citizenship guide, there was a big fight that went on just a couple months ago because our federal government wanted to take the female genital mutilation out. They wanted to get it taken out because it was classified as a barbaric act under the citizenship guide. So it's a little bit of both. I would say we are starting to see a rise where more is being done. It's more being done in Canada. But the biggest issue right now is that people are bringing their children outside of Canada, getting it performed, and then bringing them back.
That's what I would think, because I remember there was like a huge campaign against that because of that model. I forgot her name. I had to watch a movie about that. I forgot her name, but it was a model that she had the female genital mutilation, and she went in front of the UN and spoke about it. And ever since then, it's been kind of like this really big campaign about pushing to get that like abolished. So it was kind of surprising to actually hear that pop up. And I was thinking, well, it must be something that's being brought in. I don't think it might be something that's performed there, but it's actually surprising to hear you say that it's actually being practiced in Canada.
Yeah, there was a couple doctors, I think, even in the United States, Minnesota, I forget what state it was. It just got Michigan that got caught up on it, that were performing it in Michigan. And
is that a Somali? Is that a Somali population? Does that have a Somali population? Or the doctor Somalian?
The one in Michigan, I had a friend who's Indian, and he said that it's from one of the doctors was from the Indian Muslim community that he's from, and he was pretty shocked.
I know that I know female female genital mutilation was like an African practice. I think that Muslims began to adopt. It was more of I've heard this argument mainly from people on the left that it's not an African practice, that it's a Muslim practice, that it actually came out of like tribal African stuff. And because Islam eventually that's what I've heard. I mean, what you have to look that one up. Me too. This might be totally inaccurate. But it was more of a cultural thing.
Reza Aslan used that argument. Yeah.
I don't know how accurate it is, but that was the argument, that it was essentially started, and then with the Muslim rise there in those countries, it kind of turned into a Muslim practice as well. But like I said, I don't know how accurate that is.
If I'm not mistaken, it started off on like some small cult-like practices. You know how people take the Bible and they interpret things in certain ways that might not be interpreted by the general population. So what it is they interpreted some passage inside of the Quran, and they took that and they ran with it, and it was practiced among like small tribes, small collections of groups. India is I'm actually surprised to see India, but it's usually practiced among very poor tribes that practice Muslim. But I thought like I said, I thought it was a really big campaign about getting it like kind of like abolishing that.
I get the feeling that was more of a more of a press thing. It's like, yeah, we need to do something about this, but I get the feeling that not much is really being done about it.
Hey, whatever happened to that Comey guy? Or what's that guy's name?
James Comey?
Oh, he's gearing up for a book tour, I think.
No, not that fucker. Hold on. Remember that dude, that African guy that they
Coney? Joseph Coney.
That guy. Whatever happened to that guy? Did he die?
No, he's probably
playing in the jungle,
playing like Call of Duty somewhere in the jungle. People forgot him right after the campaign in 2012. I don't know if do you guys remember that? It was pretty big for 2 weeks.
Nah, hell no, it wasn't 2 weeks, dude. That shit was big for like some months.
Yeah, until the guy who was doing it went out of his mind.
Yeah, didn't he? Yeah, that dude was. Yeah, but I remember that mess was crazy. I don't know why this reminded me of that.
Well, I think he's a child soldier, enslaver, or whatever. Anyway, so does anybody have a last word? I'm not going to force you guys, but go ahead.
By any chance, Tom, do you listen to Rage Against the Machine?
I used to, like back in high school.
You remind me of Tom,
not nowadays.
You remind me of Tom Morello, the guitarist.
Oh, really? All right. I'll take that. He's a badass guitar player.
He's a dope-ass guitar player. Because that's what I thought at first. I was like, oh, shit, his name is Tom, and he kind of looks like him. Oh, shit. I was like,
I don't think Tom Morello is a nationalist. I think that would be a very huge swing in his to go from Maoist to nationalist.
You better fucking sell that shit to TMZ. Make some money.
They would just slander him as alt-right, though.
Yeah.
Yeah. He could make a solo about it.
Yeah, what's it called? Bulls on Parade for Spencer.
I used to like Rage Against the Machine when I was younger, and then I figured out what they were actually talking about, and I was like, "Fuck these communist fuckers."
Well, I was always into Incubus, and Incubus isn't that radical, but Incubus
is radical. What the fuck?
No, they're not as radical as Rage Against the Machine, but they were definitely political. I'd probably say Incubus. I'm still a fan of Korn. I don't think they're as political as those other bands, but
dude, when you're telling me that these bands are political, I'm thinking to myself like, where? I understand Rage. Rage is that's super self-explanatory.
Pearl Jam is like super anti-gun. They go on these like huge anti-gun campaigns and rants on stage. Yeah, they're pretty far left in that spectrum as well.
Korn is anti-religion more.
Yeah, yeah. I kind of take that. I mean, generally, when you get into the metal spectrum, you're kind of running into, anti-Christian. So I can kind of take that for what it is.
Except for
Yeah.
like Megadeth.
I'm a Christian and I love Slayer, so take that for what it is.
You said you love Slayer?
Yeah.
Uh-huh.
Slayer's badass, man.
Yeah.
But Korn gets my respect because they were on South Park. That's what's up.
Yeah, I'm still a huge fan of Korn.
The spooky.
Follow the Leader was like the album that really got me. It got me into music in general.
That was their only good fucking album, dude. I swear. That was like their best album.
What was the album with the little girl in the swing set? Was that Blind?
I think that was Follow the Leader.
It was that Follow the Leader? Okay, all right, then that's the same album.
Wasn't Follow the Leader the one where they're going off of a fucking cliff?
Yeah, it had like a little like cliff. They were like lemmings. They were little kids walking off a cliff or whatever.
Yeah, because Beating Me Down was about like a child molester or some shit.
Yo, I know that
was a dark ass video.
Yeah, well, I know he was like molested and stuff, I think, as a kid and stuff, and had some issues.
Yeah, he made a song about it. I didn't even know about that until I read it in a comment on YouTube. YouTube teaches you a lot.
Yeah, the album I'm talking about that had Blind on it is their self-titled album in 1994.
Yeah, the reason I came across that song, I came across that song because I was watching a fucking Street Fighter animated movie, and that shit came on at the end, and I was like, "What song is that?" And then back then it was like VHSs, so you had to wait.
I think I saw that. I think I've seen that because I saw like all those Street Fighter ones where it was like Ryu and Ken. I just remember they were like driving some red convertible or some shit on a highway. That's the only
that was it.
Yeah,
that was it.
I can remember about
that was it.
All right, guys, I am going to take off. I guess if you guys want to keep going, aren't I able to like let you keep going? But
I'm gonna sign out too, man. It's almost
I'm gonna sign out.
I'm starving. I'm getting some food. Yeah.
All right. It was great. I love the chemistry, even with Alex and whatever it was he was talking about. So it was American Gladio. Everybody. How about a final show of unity? Fuck Romney.
Fuck Romney.
Fuck Romney.
Hellfire Club.